Hi, my name is Phelim Killough. I'm a data analyst at Signifyd, a fraud protection platform that aims to eliminate fraud and risk for retailers. Today, I'll be talking about cross-border sales in Europe, both the opportunities in opening up to other markets and the risks associated with it. So on this slide, I've got a summary of what we're going to cover. At Signifyd, we have a wealth of European merchants. We pull these transactions into our commerce network to derive patterns and characteristics to detect fraud, mainly, but we can also use this sales data to pull out trends. And today we're going to look at those cross-border transactions from European merchants. So we'll be looking at cross-border growth versus domestic, and then an insight into the cart or basket of cross-border sales to see what's driving that growth. And then we'll look at the more sinister. We have a few slides on the fraud landscape overall, fraudulent routes that goods may take, and fraudy verticals. So to begin, we're going to highlight the opportunity that cross-border sales present. As we can see in the quarterly index here, the cross-border sales growth in yellow has outpaced the domestic growth in the last 8 quarters, even through peak Q4 sales periods. The gap has even widened in the past 4. This highlights that the demand is there. People are casting a wide net when searching and scrolling for goods and can be enticed by merchants from further afield, giving the right incentive or offering available. So moving on, we're going to take a look at that cart, that basket that people are checking out with. Looking at this top row, we're looking at cross-border sales only, and we have average selling price up 13%. This is the street average of all prices of goods sold. While not inflation calculation, it's clear that it's prevalent in this number. But what this also describes is a shift in customer behavior to purchase more expensive products from abroad. So this indicates that people are willing to spend a premium when shopping across borders. Our cart size, our number of products in the basket, has remained flat. So as expected, our average order value for a cross-border transaction is up 13%, purely driven by that increase in average selling price. Then we look at the bottom row. We can see that the sales are up 20%, and this is driven by average order value too, as we discussed. But I've added some other data points here. Consumers are transacting 7% more than this time last year, and they're also coming from more consumers as measured by distinct emails, up 5% over last year. So that amounts to, so it should be said that this kind of performance is a vast improvement on domestic performance, where growth is sort of flat to negative. So in short, there is a demand again for cross-border transactions, and consumers are willing to spend increasingly more to get products from abroad. So that's the good news, and that's the opportunity that it presents. We'll go on to talk about fraud now. Moving on to the risks of cross-border transactions, and there are risks. Fraud in general is getting more sophisticated and can exploit weak points in the payment stacks. Fraud protection strategies, which may be more exposed when operating across borders. So in the last 12 months, we've seen a 29% increase in fraud pressure, which is orders deemed very risky by Signifyd decisioning models. This is driven by both frequency and size of transaction, and this has resulted thus far in a 23% increase in friendly fraud or first-party fraud, and criminal fraud has increased by 1%. This, in general, follows the trend we're seeing like across Europe, not just in cross-border sales, with friendly fraud or first-party fraud taking off and criminal fraud flattening. So this isn't new news here or something that needs to be specifically looked at for cross-border, but it's something to be aware of when taking orders from abroad. So moving on to the next slide, and these next 2 slides are a bit of FYI to tell you where the fraud is happening and who with. So we are taking a look here at verticals and fraud proportion or fraud pressure rate, which is a measure of how many of those risky transactions we are seeing as a percentage of the total. I've ranked them by fraud pressure rate to show that the clear winner is the fashion vertical, often plagued with things like consumer abuse. It's at the top spot and has remained there from last year. And in the most recent years, we've seen luxury and general merchandise make gains in the rankings as fraudsters continue to shift their focus. This map shows the same data, that fraud pressure rate, so proportion of risky orders by country for orders placed at a UK merchant. So key things to take away here is if you look at the customers from larger English-speaking countries, so Canada, US, and Australia, we see that they are relatively high risk in terms of proportion of fraud observed. So it's not just um, cultural differences in language barriers that cause an increased risk. While Western Europe and Scandinavia have a lower traffic risk, there's definitely a need for pause and review of fraud protection strategy when expanding to the likes of LATAM, Africa, or large parts of Asia, as these are coming up red on the map, and we see high volume of fraud pressure from these countries. So that's me for today. Just recap on the key takeaways. There is opportunity in cross-border sales to reach new customers and to boost growth. Overall fraud patterns remain, or chargeback patterns remain the same, with consumer abuse on the rise. Asian, African, and American sales from UK merchants are considerably more risky than European markets, and fashion suffers the most fraud pressure on cross-border transactions. So I've been Phelim Killough, and that is my presentation for today. And please do reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you.